UNLV Microcertificate Economics. Going to give you a short course on environmental economics. You can spend a year studying environmental economics and not study it all. So 15 minutes is what you get, and it's a start. We need to start by making sure we understand the word externality. We actually talked about this briefly before, but an externality is a cost or benefit paid or received by someone other than the parties who made a choice. So, you make a choice to go to the gym and not shower afterwards, and then you go meet some friends, and they're all like, phew. You have created a cost for them, a negative externality. So there are external benefits. Build a park in your neighborhood. Your value of your house will go up. That's an external benefit. Pollute the air that I breathe. That's an external cost. Okay? So somebody gets something or pays something, but they didn't have anything to do with it. So you pollute the river, I'm downriver, I have to drink polluted water. I didn't get a choice in whether or not you were going to pollute the river. I just have to put up with it. That's an external cost. Okay? More explicitly, we have what we call private cost and social cost. So the private cost is a cost paid by the actor, the person, the business, the government, whatever it is that made that choice. Freeway. I don't know if you ever tried to drive LA freeways the wrong time of day. But when you get onto that freeway, you slow down to people around you. And even Vegas freeways, right? Even if it's going relatively quick, somebody will merge in front of you and not be going freeway speed, and you slow down and everybody behind you has to slow down. The person who gets on the freeway, that person is paying their private costs. They take how much time it takes them to drive to their destination. That's their private cost. They slow everybody else down. So they slow down 100 other people, 200 other people. And each one of those people, maybe it only takes them 10 seconds longer to get to work because that person merged. But if it's 200 people, 10 seconds, that's 2,000 seconds total that all those people paid. So you say, well, it's a small social cost, but the factory pollutes the air. They don't have to breathe that smog in. The people downwind do. So all those people downwind who are breathing that smog or who put up with acid rain that's created by that smog, all those people are paying a social cost. All right, the optimal thing is when the private cost equals the social cost. If there was a sign that said, when you get on this freeway, you're going to slow everybody down, you should pay, we're going to make you pay $5 to get on this freeway, some people would choose not to get on the freeway. Okay? Or they would handle it differently. If you've ever been to California, there are toll roads, and the toll depends on how crowded the road is, which is an attempt to equate the private cost and the social cost. Okay, so if we have a negative externality, what does private and social cost tell us? Well, people aren't paying enough. The private people are not paying enough if there's a divergence between, right? It's a negative externality. So prices will be too low, quantities are too high. So if producing steel creates pollution, the price of steel is too low because the steel company has to pay the private cost, but not the cost of everybody who's affected by the pollution. And they're producing too much steel. Society would be better off if they produce less steel and therefore less pollution. So externalities create inefficiencies. The price is not right. Okay? And we can fix that, should fix that. Should. Now, the guy who first coined all this stuff is a man named A.C. Pagoo. That's his picture. He's a kind of weird-looking guy. Adam Smith actually knew that externalities exist, and he talked about them. He just didn't have the language that we have to talk about them. Okay, so Pagoo comes up with this catchy phrase that we need to internalize the externality. That means the people who create the externality, if it's a negative externality, the people who create it need to pay for it. If it's a positive externality, then the people who benefit should pay the creator. We need to equate benefits and costs correctly. Pollution is a negative externality. I love the mountains in Colorado, but if you're driving around the mountains in Colorado, you see these kind of things everywhere that are just disgusting. They're tailing pits from the right? A lot of times there's ore that's dragged out of the ground, and the way you separate the gold or the other element from the ore is you bathe it in acid baths and stuff, and you get this horrible, horrible stuff up in the mountains, and they're all supposed to clean it up, but they don't. And there are streams that you shouldn't drink of that look beautiful, like little bubbling mountain streams in Colorado, that you should really never touch that water because it's full of lead or it's full of some other thing. And it might have been that way for 70 or 80 years. There might be an old abandoned mine from the 1800s even where they diverted that creek through the mine, and then when the mine ran out, they left, and doesn't stop the lead or whatever from percolating through that stream now. It never got fixed. So Pagoo and others say, look, there's three ways to deal with this. One is to create property rights, and we'll talk about that in a second, and I'll talk about all these again in a second. One is to pass some laws, some government laws that say you can't do this or you have to do this. There's a fight going on, lots of fights, and we mentioned this before, all over the country. Nevada is one of the states where these are going on, where we want to mine, we want to be energy independent, right? And so we want to mine cobalt and other stuff that we need for the electrical, electric cars, electric vehicles. But it's on places where it will the mining could cause substantial environmental damage. And so there's fights about should we do this and should we not do it? What's the right way? The other thing you can do, the last thing you can do is tax things or price things or even subsidize things if they're positive. So property rights. Who owns the stream? Well, most of the time nobody owns the stream, right? The state or the federal government owns the stream. Well, what happens if we give that stream to a private party? If I own it, and you're dumping stuff my way and it's flowing down my river, well, now I can take you to court, right? I can sue you because you are polluting my stream. I can't identify the air. I don't own the air. I can't sue necessarily over getting pollution in the air. I can't sue, but if I own this, right? So part of the problem here is sometimes you can't identify property rights. You can't identify where did that pollution come from? Yeah, it damaged me, but where did it come from? There's 10 steel mills. Which one created the exact pollution that damaged my... So now if I sue you, I can make you put in abatement technology. I can make you produce less. I can make you do something as long as we can identify both ends of that stream. There are conservation groups that use this to protect wildlife. They buy a piece of land, and then when somebody... they can go, hey, suit, I'm going to sue you. That's my land. That means that's my coyote. Okay? Now, related to this is this thing called the Coase theorem, invented by this guy named Ronald Coase. That's him. And the classic example of this is farmers and ranchers. You have a farmer and a rancher next to each other, and the rancher's cows keep coming over and eating the farmer's corn. Pagoo would say the rancher needs to get taxed by the government, or the government needs to pass a law to prevent it. Coase says, look, in the absence of transaction costs, these guys know it. The market will work. The market can settle that. Let the two of them work it out. Force them to make an agreement, right? And maybe there's all kinds of things they could come up with. But if there's no transaction costs, the market can deal with this. The problem is, again, that we have these transaction costs. Can we identify the owner? Can we identify the creator? Can we right? If we can figure out where stuff is coming from and who owns what, then we could let the market actually solve this. But more times than not, we can't do the things we need to do to identify, right? And therefore, we can't use the Coase theorem. So, laws and regulations, right? We can require clean technology. Many countries in Europe already have dates where they're banning internal combustion engines after a certain date. U.S. car companies recognizing that eventually the U.S. might be the only country where you can buy a gasoline-powered car, switching to EVs because they know their market and they have to sell. Okay? So we can create laws, we can create regulations that say, hey, you can't sue, or you can't pollute, you have to clean up the air, you have to clean up the mine when you're done. All of these things that are laws and regulations that we can put into place. We can also tax. So there are countries like Ireland and Canada and Germany and Norway and Sweden that have pollution taxes. If you pollute, they tax you. Okay? Four countries produce more than half of all the world's carbon. That's China, the U.S., or not countries. The European Union is not a country. In India, only some of those countries in Europe are doing this kind of thing. And so we're not... How do you stop carbon emissions when... Right? Yeah. So some examples here. Remember, economics is about trade-offs. Economics is about nothing is always free or simple. There's always, costs. So for a while, we thought the way to go was to switch to alcohol. And the U.S. government was pushing very hard to switch to alcohol. Countries all over the world were pushing very hard to add alcohol to gasoline and eventually go. Well, there's a problem with that. We make alcohol out of corn. Most of the alcohol in the world comes out of corn, some from sugar, but mostly from corn. As we started pushing this, food prices started to go up because farmers wanted to sell their corn. They got a better price from the alcohol people. Food prices went up. And then Brazil increased the rate at which they were chopping down the Amazon because they wanted to plant corn. And it turned out that a few years into this drive to go to alcohol, there was an actually increase in carbon emissions because of the other things that were happening, right? What we call unintended consequences. And you don't see that big push for alcohol anymore. Okay? Walmart has this huge program to green up their stores. So they're converting to LED lighting. They recycle electronics. They're putting natural light windows into the ceilings of their stores. They're enclosing refrigerators, which, by the way, refrigerators and freezers that are open to the air are the biggest energy wasters in your grocery store. Your grocery store should stop it, and you should tell them to stop that and close their refrigerators and freezers. How did they decide what to do in their stores? Well, it turned out they only did things that created a profit for them. Okay? People respond to incentives. The easiest way to get people to do the right thing is to give them an incentive, to give them money, So Walmart, by lessening their electrical bills, they can pay for the LED lights, they can pay for the natural lighting, they can pay for enclosing the refrigerators, and over time it'll actually increase their profits to be green. But they had a list of about 100 things, they only chose to do, around 20 of them, because those were the ones that they could actually make money off of. So we love this push. We're going to electric cars slowly but surely. There's two problems with them. One is the batteries are full of toxic minerals and toxic chemicals, right? Usually acids in batteries, toxic heavy metals. We have to recycle the batteries, right? The batteries wear out, we have to recycle them. If there's an accident involving an electric vehicle, it might spill acids on the road. We have these issues, so we've got to take care of the batteries. How are we going to deal with the batteries? Where are we going to get the cobalt for the batteries? And then, where does the electricity come from? If you live in an area that has a coal-fired power plant, instead of running your gasoline car on gasoline, you're running your electric car on coal. Neither one of those is exactly environmentally sound, right? If you want to have an electrical car, maybe you need solar panels on your house, and maybe the government you want an example of government stupidity? the county, Clark County, or the state of Nevada should have required every house built in Clark County and every business building built in Clark County in the last 30 years to have solar. Think of how much better we'd be if every house had solar, even if it was just a solar pool heater or a solar water heater. It doesn't have to be solar electrical power. But think about all the gas and electricity we would be saving right now if they had just said, you need solar on your house. Every house that gets built to get a permit needs solar. So will technology save us? Well, yeah, maybe, maybe not, right? If technology makes everything more expensive, then it makes the people in the poorer countries worser off, right? And some of those countries are free riders. Some countries gain by not doing green stuff. So there's a whole industry in, for example, Bangladesh that takes old beat-up ships that need to be dismantled. But in the United States, we would take that ship because it's full of toxins, and we would, to rip it apart, you'd have to wrap it up in plastic, and it's very expensive, and it's going to cost millions and millions of dollars to dismantle that ship and dispose of it. In Bangladesh, you just drive that ship up onto the beach, and they give a bunch of guys whose life expectancy is about 5 years, they give a bunch of guys sledgehammers and crowbars, and they rip the ship apart. Okay? Some countries gain by taking advantage of these things and not going green, right? The other side of this, remember, is positive externalities. Education has huge positive externalities. Education is not very efficient. The market doesn't work very well. There's this whole voucher thing and who benefits, but society benefits, right? So here we have a class full of accounting majors learning how to do accounting. They can go out in the business world, and they're already pre-trained, and the businesses can hire them with training. And they understand how things work, and they understand when a presidential candidate or a mayoral candidate says blah, 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 they can analyze that because we trained them, right? There's lots of positive externalities, right? Adam Smith talked about the value of having an educated workforce and just an educated population in general. We already talked about parks being a positive externality, right? Parks increase the value of homes. They make life much better off. But remember, all of these things, there's always trade-offs, and there are no free lunches. We don't get anything for free. When they say free healthcare or free college education, no, right? Economists do not use the word free. We know there will be costs and there will be trade-offs. But we also know how exciting economics is.